As India's first Prime Minister, he consolidated our democracy and entrenched the basic values of our polity, values to which we are still proud to lay claim. What are these values? First, democracy. It could not have been taken for granted in 1947 that a country beset by acute poverty and torn apart by partition would become or remain democratic. It was Nehru who instilled a democratic culture in our country by his scrupulous regard for the form as well as the substance of democracy. His respect for Parliament, his regard for the independence of the judiciary, his courtesy to those of different political convictions, his commitment to free election, his faith in a free press, and his deference to institutions over individuals have all left us a precious legacy of freedom. Second, secularism. He lived up to his lifelong conviction that India belonged to all its people. In both policy and personal practice, Nehru stood for an idea of India that embraced every religion, caste, ethnicity, and language. Third, socialism. It is fashionable today to decry Nehruvian socialism as a system that tied India to many years of modest growth. This does not take into account the circumstances of the early years of independence, when massive infrastructure needed to be built up and the private sector lacked the ability to invest on a large transformative scale. At the core of his socialism was the conviction that in a land of extreme poverty and inequality, the objective of government policy must be the welfare of the poorest, most deprived, and most marginalized of its people. In his day, the best way to attain this goal was by building up structures of public ownership and state control of national resources. Today, our thinking has evolved as it should, and we can take pride in our role in liberalizing our country's economy and in making possible so many new avenues for dynamic enterprise to succeed in a globalizing world. At the same time, we remain steadfast in our concern for the weakest sections of society. Finally, foreign policy. Nehru was a convinced internationalist. For him, in the Cold War, non-alignment was the only possible response to the bipolar divisions of the era. In its essence, the Nehruvian vision was about safeguarding India's independence and self-respect against potential encroachments on its sovereignty. Over the years, Congress governments have taken Nehru's ideals forward. They have widened the scope of our democracy through such innovations as Panchayati Raj, with its reservation for women, and the Right to Information Act, to mention just a few. They have defended secularism in the face of violent threats to our nation's diversity. They have deepened socialism innovatively through the creation of a framework of rights, including the right to work, the right to food, the right to education, and the right to fair compensation for land. All of these measures have strengthened and empowered our people, especially the poorest. Today, we must honor him by fighting with determination to safeguard our democracy against those who are undermining it.